there, everybody, and welcome back to our Analytics Excellence Certification Series. I'm Tom Marlowe, currently president of Black Hills IP Renewals, formerly head of the IP department at Fairchild Semiconductor. Number of years dealing with analytics, the use of them, the creation of them, and so on. And as always, I'm joined by Mr. Mark Stignani. Mark, how you doing?
I'm well. Thank you for coming along here for this ride. As I'm currently the analytics practice chair over at Schweigman Lundberg Wozner. Previously was in a IP role, IP attorney role at Thomson Reuters for a great number of years, and have been deeply steeped in the whole world of patent analytics for most of my career. So great to be here, and thanks for having me along.
Great, thanks, Mark. Well, this is going to be an interesting one. I know it's a subject you like, myself as well. We could probably take a few hours talking about this, so we'll try and squeeze it into one as best as we can. But today's topic is going to be prior art and white space analytics, how to perform them and how to use them right.
Yep, and just go ahead.
I was just going to say it, Mark. Why don't you take it away?
Alrighty. Well, as you can see here, we are at the end of our introductory series of analytics here. So just wanted to point out to everybody here that if you've been with us for the whole journey here, we can you can count yourself as someone who's seen kind of the depth and breadth of what it takes for kind of basic analytic work in the industry as it stands today. The good news is that we don't have to all cram it into one result there. But yes, there is a test. If you guys want to get a certificate for you, we do have a short quiz, true and false, covers the length and breadth of it. We consider a 75% right test set a passing grade, and you get a certificate, and you can actually put the status up on your LinkedIn page as well. So as this comes to an end, we do plan to have seminars going forward on analytics on advanced topics now. So one of the things that we will try to do now is pick things that really can't be covered in just an hour, and really dive into methodologies and other pitfalls and traps and best practices as we go into that. So for those who think that this is the best thing since sliced bread, there's more bread coming. So without further ado, let's just start talking about prior art and white space. So this is an area that greatly suffers from definition ambiguity. So I have seen more marketing materials talking about landscaping, white space analysis, non-infringement, validity, patentability, literally in the same breath and almost in the same price point. And at least for me, and we're going to cover some of these definitions in depth and detail as we go through this to a large degree, just to help delineate these things, because white space is never, in my mind, the same as a landscape. It is never the same as a validity or non-infringement thought, and it requires an entirely different type of analysis. So we'll get into more of that. Also, as we're talking through prior art analysis, we have a strong distinction of what is claimed in the patents themselves that we're looking at versus what is disclosed in the patent specifications and other documents. We will generally call them non-patent literature, because when you're doing prior art analysis, anything that's published under certain guidelines is considered prior art. And so this takes us a lot further, a lot farther, a lot more beyond where a lot of the statistical stuff we've seen previously in analytics take us. So why does it matter? It's risk mitigation, it's also identification opportunity, all that stuff. How do we do it? A lot of this is not something we can do in simple statistical analysis. I have a problem with that word all day, I promise you. So the dashboard that we've been showing here kind of throughout the series may be a good starting point, but we definitely have to go into use other tool sets as we're going into this. So, Tom, did I miss anything on this slide, or should we just jump into definitions?
No, this is good. The only thing that I would add is just to stress that claim versus disclosure and the difference between these various types of analytics, landscape versus non-infringement, prior art and patentability come into play as well. And it never ceases to surprise me how often the things get mixed up, or one type of analysis gets attempted to be used for the purpose of another type of analysis. And when that happens, you're bound to have holes, or you're bound to have just analysis that doesn't work. And so that's where I think what we're going to be talking about today will help, at least for those on the line, help clear up some of that mess so that none of us walk into those types of things.
Okay, well, let's move on then to the, in my mind, one of the biggest points of confusion when I'm talking with vendors and then talking with individuals. So I have seen more people advertising landscape searches and freedom to operate searches with impunity without really kind of identifying what the purpose of those things are. So this is a definition that I've come up with. The patent landscape is really a look at a topic of patenting. So whether it's mobile devices that you wear on your hat, or something that you can describe within a series of a specific technology, probably has a limit in geography as well. And tell me what's been patented in the U.S. In my mind, those things are landscapes. Those things are basically a point-in-time shot of what is in existence, what is expired, what is abandoned. They can perform a policy discussion, strategic research within the organization. It can give you views of what your competitors' behaviors are, as we've covered in other things. We can start to see where tech transfer is going when we start looking at the various assignments and other statistical data around ownership.
And these are used, Mark, if you agree, to get kind of more of that statistical kind of analysis. Who's playing in this area? What have been the trends? To guide, I like that first point, informing policy discussions. Where do we want to kind of move with respect to this from a high level?
Yeah, so this is in many ways, very much who's and what's what in the marketplace. Now, freedom to operate is like dipping your toe in the pool. You're trying to figure out from an analysis if your particular product or service or the thing you want to do intersects or doesn't intersect with other IP estates out there. So specifically, again, we go back to the kind of the hat wearable mobile devices. You basically might want to roughly define what your device is, the nuances that make it interesting and unique and marketable, and then go out there and do a search. Your first step might be a patent landscape, but you're trying to define clusters of patent grants for the primary analysis, and then clusters of up-and-coming applications that you will be watching going forward, and then you attempt to clear what you're doing against that. So that is diving deep into the claims, comparing them with your device with the two-finger test. And the two-finger test, as we spoke about earlier, is you put your finger on the claim and you put your finger on the device or product you're shooting, and you go down point by point on the elements of that claim to see if your device is encumbered or so by that particular claim. So huge amount of cost difference in doing these two things as well. Freedom to Operate will probably have at least one patent landscape search in it. It may have several, but the activity in a Freedom to Operate is so different than what you're doing in the landscape that they are in my world, almost bookends in patent analytics. So Tom, do you have any other thoughts on the Freedom to Operate side?
Yeah, and I think the only thing that's important to recognize is from a Freedom to Operate perspective, the scope of the claims is of primary importance, central importance, as opposed to the patent landscape. It's more about the technology of the patents that you're looking at. So it can happen. So there's a lot of times where that landscape data can be used to help kickstart a freedom to operate. It can happen that you end up with a freedom to operate search that is going to include patents that you wouldn't necessarily include in a landscape. So maybe broad patents that are in another technology area that you still have to analyze because you need clearance over them, that wouldn't necessarily be useful statistically in a patent landscape.
That's true. And also I forgot to really emphasize that freedom to operate tends to be an ongoing thing. If you're continuing with the product development, you probably should be continuing your freedom to operate monitoring in that respect, whereas a patent landscape simply tends to be a point-in-time search. So again, if you get someone who offers you a freedom to operate activity that's not a law firm and they want $600 for it, you're probably going to get what you paid for because it's not going to be useful, I think, past the point-in-time search. So there's my editorial. Good morning, or at least the first one. Let's move to another area of great confusion. So validity or invalidity, non-infringement or infringement, and patentability. So let's just kind of break them up. So invalidity is really about invalidating a particular patent using prior art. So, and it doesn't just apply to independent claims. It applies to every single claim that you have to divine prior art that is before the priority date of the patent you're trying to invalidate, and you have to find sufficient reason, sufficient teaching that allows you to find each and every claim invalid. On the counterpoint, if you have something that you're worried about validity on, then you try to figure out ways to differentiate those pieces of prior art. So there's two sides of the argument in that respect. But validity states, in my mind, are much more rare because usually prior art's prior art. And if someone has you dead to rights, there's not a lot of arguing you can do to overcome that. But that is where each and every word in the claim, in each and every claim, is under scrutiny and has a prior art research to go with it. So when I say prior art, I mean anything patents, papers, proceedings put up by universities, research institutions, pretty much anything that validates as a piece of published studies, technologies, and that sort of stuff. So prior art just is in the broadest definition, things that teach you what the claims are purporting to cover that happened before the claim existed. On the other hand, patentability study is you either have an existing patent or you have an idea that you're looking to figure out if you can actually get a patent on it. So you'll do a study to figure out if anything in the prior art equals what your disclosure looks like. And also this would also be an area of continuation where you have a soon-to-be allowed patent, but you feel you haven't covered everything that was disclosed in the claims or disclosed in the specification itself. So you would think about generating new claims and make some judgment about patentability on that based upon the previous prosecution history. So that's kind of the one pillar of study. The other side is, non-infringement is really, again, a pointed question. Does a device or a product or a service that you're offering infringe or not infringe? It usually comes up at play when you have somebody walk in the door and say, hey, we think your patent infringes. We would like you to pay us, some percentage of your gross income. And so these types of studies usually come in with a distinct patent or a distinct set of patents. And what you're trying to do is take the product that they claim is infringing and figure out, in your client's view, like most positive to your client, why it does not. And generally, this is only a review of independent claims, because if you knock out the independent claims, then you also knock out the dependent claims on infringement studies like this. So this is very much laser-like focused on either independent individual patent or a small cluster of patents, and drawn against a product in general, versus trying to find everything under the sun that would invalidate claims in that respect. Again, the flip side would be infringement studies where you're looking at types of processes, composition apparatuses that might infringe a patent or patents that you are in review for. So, if I've thoroughly confused everybody, please, there's a question component to this webinar. So if you start, looking for clarification, just start type a question in, and we'll try to answer it as close to time as your question is asked. So, Tom, do you have any?
Yeah, these, like you mentioned, these can be confusing because there's a lot of data, especially on a slide like this. But the way that it's laid out, you look on the left, and you've got kind of the central thing you're analyzing is a patent, particularly its claim scope with respect to what's been disclosed in the past, prior art. So, the claim scope of your current patent versus prior art. And then in the column on the right, you're looking at a product with respect to patents claims. So if you break it down to that kind of, at least to those simple concepts, patents claims versus prior art on one side, and a product versus patent claims on the other side, that helps get an idea of how these analyses are going to be very different.
Absolutely, and the pricing of these analyses can be very, very, very different as well. I mean, a non-infringement study generally is, a small percentage, under 50% of the price of a validity study, just because of so much effort drawn towards. You might have 3 independent claims. You might only, but in an validity study, you may have 20 more dependent claims that you need to go out and find prior art on as well. So. Again, a vastly different cost structure when you're talking about these various studies. So hopefully that's as clear as mud, and we'll continue on here with another definition. So one of my favorite topics under the sun here, white space analysis. So in my mind, this is the hardest analysis to do right, because what are you trying to define? Your white space is the absence of disclosure. It is the absence of invention. So you're looking through a lot of claimed subject matter, and you're trying to figure out in what way does it not say something. So there's two approaches, one of which is useful and one of which is not. The boil the ocean approach is where you take a set of patents and you distill out a series of topics that they're disclosing, and then you try to artificially generate what they are not disclosing. I find that very hard to do. I think it's very time consuming, and it's also not nearly as helpful as if we play the 20 questions game. So when I'm doing white space analysis with clients, I try to come up with a series of narrowing questions as to what do they think they want to invent. So rather than looking for what is not there, what we're doing is looking for what they want to do. And what they would like to do. So we do have a question about no slides on the screen. Is everyone getting slides on the screen? So I've got them on my side, but I just want to make sure everybody's seeing the slides here. I'll keep going. So when you're working with white space analysis, a lot of times it's best to take your legal team and your technical team and sit them down together and go through an ideation seminar with them, or an ideation component by component, what they think they want to invent, what type of product they want to build, and create your own taxonomy for what happens when you're building out the product that they envision. I mean, because in most cases you're not just doing wild open field ideation. What you tend to be doing is we're looking to build a product with these 15 or 16 components to it. So in the start of any white space analysis, you should actually pick out what they think they want to invent, and that by itself helps you answer those specific questions and say, given these parameters, there is no white space, or there is significant white space. I don't even use the word white space. I use prior art density to tell them that there's high prior art density in this area. There's a lot of disclosure. There's mediate or moderate or low prior art density in this area. So I don't even like the term white space in general, because I think it's been used in a marketing sense that it really creates more problems than it does makes for helpful things. This is a specification analysis. Yeah, go ahead.
This is a really good point. Going into the white space analysis, like you make with your product or your technology or what you're planning on developing in mind. I can't tell you, I'm sure you've seen it before. I've seen it time and time again. You walk into the room and you're working with somebody and they say, all right, we want to develop, we want to move into this new space. Let's do a white space analysis and figure out all the spaces that we can get patent coverage to help, corner it off. Yeah. And that's really difficult to do, because you're looking for what's not there, not knowing exactly what you want to put there. And it's not as easy as just saying, well, here's a map and here's the 3 countries that we've discovered, so we're going to go and discover the island in the middle, because ideas don't necessarily work that way. So having an idea of, okay, we want to develop something that does A, B, and C. Well, we can look at A, B, and C and see what the prior art looks like in those areas and see how it's been done, and understanding how it's been done and what has been protected and what has been disclosed in those areas can either help us understand, well, this is going to be too busy of an area to try and get into, too much of a thicket, or it's going to be something where we can say, okay, well, only these basic techniques have been done, but there's going to be, we'll say white space to improve on them. Nobody's done it like this or like that. And you've got to really get the engineering team in there thinking about, well, what's not disclosed. If it was clear what wasn't disclosed, then maybe that technology isn't terribly patentable anyway.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the takeaways there, because a lot of times you're going to find that what the engineering team has in mind is something very, very different than the set of patents that you're looking at, and so that really helps you to decide whether you've got the right search result as well. So moving to the right-hand column, there's this lovely little island and ocean map that a lot of commercial providers provide, and that they intimate is a white space analysis. What you're seeing there is basically a vector distance between noun pairs in the patent documents themselves. So it is, in my mind, it has no meaningful, it has nothing meaningful in it that I can explain to a client. It has word pairs, and I believe you can harvest glossaries, so that's a useful thing. But as far as telling you what the white space is, there's no coordinate system for this type of mapping. It's pretty, you can show it to somebody, but the moment they ask you to look at it and explain it, I can't. I mean, I have been trying to explain graphics like this for over a decade, especially when I was at Thomson Reuters, and I can't. There's nothing that I find of real value in these things, and they're definitely not a white space map. So I have not found a single good white space analysis tool that does things in a statistical way or an autonomous way, because it's very hard to have a statistical engine or even a heuristic engine discover what is negative space, what is not there, what is not included in this analysis. So again, this is one of the things where I spend a great deal of time educating my clients on that. No, I can't just push a button and tell you where the white space is in this particular area of patenting, because this isn't a white space analysis. So I can't be more cruel to this thing because it just doesn't. It's not helpful. I've had a number of clients where they've thought these things are good things, and they ask me to generate them, and then when we start to look under the peaks and valleys and try to figure out what's in there, a lot of times the assumptions made by the statistical engine are absolutely false. You would have something with no basis in your analytics thrown in underneath the covers there. So again, this is the truest adage of garbage in, garbage out. Because even if you pare the set down by hand and get all the best patents in this space, you're still left with something that's very hard to explain to a client.
Mark, I'm having a hard time getting a sense of how you feel about these types of analytics.
Yeah, I'm pretty ambiguous about this, but you know, it is one of the few things that I just can't I can't abide in this. So I'm not a fan. So
I agree. These types of maps or similar, even ones that are less say topographically pretty are interesting, but I've really similarly had a very hard time finding them to be actionable in any way. So
yeah. And especially when you have a CTO or somebody looking at the map and say, "Well, doesn't this tell me this?" And I say, "No, that's not what it tells you at all. I mean, what does it mean when you have ocean instead of the island?" And I said, "I can't tell you that." So anyway, so we can move on here. I don't want to belabor it too much more, but it just suffice to say, what is white space analysis? It is the definition of what isn't there, and to somehow define it, refine it in such a way that your client can write patents, or you can write patents into those spaces in a meaningful way that gives you market advantage or business advantage by doing so. And nothing I've seen in the commercial space does this. And I should say, in the commercial space, I mean the online tools, things as well. So what do? We use, at the firm here, we use quantitative tools to get us into the landscape. We use public matters, including patents, patents and trademarks and social media and Google Scholar searches. And so we try to get everything under the sun in a general landscape search there. The dashboard takes and puts a spin on the statistics of the patents. We use methods of latent semantic sorting to come up with clusters and customized categories that are meaningful to us, at least in our analysis. And then once we hit all that in one place, we throw it over to the wall and put it into our qualitative tool set that we use. We use a proprietary tool we built here to do a lot of our claim and spec mapping. It's basically, its output's an Excel spreadsheet. We find it a very easy and fast thing to use. We use it for FTO work, licensing and monetization review. We also have a fairly quick and sophisticated way of looking at file histories to help us really kind of dig down into the actual limitations on the claim themselves. So we throw those things together. We start on the left-hand side of the tools, make some judgment there, get a refined set of patents that we cared about and put them into the right-hand side, into the qualitative tool set. And that's where the human review, the human activity of analysis kind of occurs. So this is we find this is probably the fastest way to get to an answer, because sometimes your answer will be very quickly available on the quantitative or statistical side. But if you still have things you worry about or can't answer there, then the qualitative review is really the final and best arbiter of that question. Mm-hmm. So moving right along, the methodology here that we use. We like to use machines to shred and harvest the glossaries of both the specification and claims. Why do we do that?
Mark, Mark, let me just ask you a question here. Yeah. When you say shred and harvest, I don't think everyone is familiar with those terms. What exactly are you talking about there?
All right. So these are my terms. I'll put definition on those. So when I say shred, I say we take basically the patent document. We take the written portions, the textual portions of the specification, and textual portions of the claims. And we put them into a text analyzer. So the text analyzer will take all the nouns and the noun pairs, 3, 4, and 5 word phrases that appear meaningful, and also action verbs, and put those into a table where we can start to look and understand the glossary that has been used in that particular patent application or patent grant. So we use that, and then we compare that against the glossary that they use in the claims. So one way to do that, one reason for doing that is that you're supposed to have support for all of your glossary and the words you've used in your claims in the specifications. That doesn't always happen, especially if you're in a continuation practice area. So we find as a general first step to actually understand the language used, the linguistics used in the specification and the patent itself are hugely useful in making determinations of quality and other things in that side of the each side of there. We then start to develop synonyms. Why do we do this? Because especially when you're looking across more than one patent, there'll be a number of terms used that have other synonyms or phrases used to mean the same thing in the other patents. And we're doing this to find concepts that are in common or claim elements that are in common in both sense. So in the specification, if we can find, say, for instance, we talk about my mobile device that you wear in your hat, we're looking for headgear, headwear, as well as hats, as well as caps and other things like that. And we try to, cluster those together as to, meaning the same thing contextually. And, one question we've kind of gotten in here, do we use ontologies for synonym generation? We do use thesauruses, probably more though. And we do then generate ontologies if it makes sense, or else we use clustering algorithms to make clusters, logical clusters as well. So thank you for that question. Then I also call something pseudo-synonyms because a lot of times in particular patents, the way they use words is different than they would use it in another patent. They mean entirely different things. So you can find a synonym, but they may be entirely different. So this is why if you don't put the effort in and understand what is really meant contextually in each of the patents, then you can end up with a synonym approach that isn't correct. So this is where, unfortunately, the hard work gets into the human review required in these things. So then we'll compare for the concept sought, especially in the case of the white space analysis. We're going back to the 20 questions, or actually the 20 questions would be simply an ontology or a genus, species, and subspecies of concepts. And so you're looking to find those in the specification itself. Then you rank and rate the quality of disclosure on the specification side. On the claim side, you're really looking to find common claim elements that you don't care to deal with going forward. So you'll literally remove those from contention if you can find a synonym or pseudo-synonym that doesn't work there. So these are, again, it's easy to list them down there, but the real hard work is going through and understanding the workflow of, or the verbal invention flow through each of the patent applications or patent grants that you're looking at. So that tends to be our process of doing it. There is a fair amount of human labor involved in that. We do use machines to get us through number 1 and number 4. In some cases, we will look for common comparisons between word phrases and things, especially in continuing or family applications. But that's essentially the methodology, because we're basically trying to understand the terms and glossary used in each of the specifications, and then find points of commonality between specifications and points of commonality between the claims. And those are done for different reasons, different things. So, non-infringement study, I may only be looking at claims. In a white space analysis, I'm definitely looking at specification using those. So in general, we probably won't do both at the same time. We'll do one, and then the other one may be a secondary distinguishing aspect if we go through that later. All right, so I'm going to start pushing through a little faster here, I think.
Mark, let me just ask, a decent portion of this methodology here relies on, I guess, the thoroughness and quality of the initial search that's been done.
Yes.
Do you tend to see that search being kind of a discrete thing that's done, or something that kind of grows through the analysis and you find new keywords and new synonyms and kind of plug them back in and pull in new matters?
Very much the latter. I mean, this is iteration at its finest and most rarefied form, because a lot of times once you get deep into the weeds in some of the specifications here, you're going to find that there's a number of concepts that the searcher just never covered. So in many cases we'll stop, especially during the shred and harvest of the glossary component. You're starting to develop your synonym list. You're going to go, oh, holy moly, we forgot this key concept. So they'll go back and point it at the searcher, or you'll just, if you're doing semantic searching, you'll add that and give that term a higher ranking in the search results, and see if what else comes in. So there's nothing but iteration in this methodology. I would not trust a single search.
Makes sense.
So what are we doing? I mean, this is the way we try to do human analysis and machine assistance. The machine does a lot of the comparison. It does a lot of the kind of first chunking of things out. But we use this, for prior density analysis, engineering design rounds, so forth and so on. So I'm just going to go through kind of how we work through abstraction in this respect. Basically in the claim abstraction, we're really looking at the value of a patent and a patent claim and the breadth of a patent claim. So we try to do that in this area. And then as we're coming up to size, as I mentioned earlier, we do assign ontologies to these things in very much the same way that for those who did law school on the call here, we try to come up with a kind of an organizational scheme like the key number system is over at Thomson Reuters in their Westlaw system, or the West key number system. So we try to draw an analogy between that, and here it is, because what we do is we take the patent claim, we try to write a head note on it, or what we'll find scope concepts or scope limitations on those things, and really highlight them as we're doing our analysis in that respect. So in essence, what we're doing here is the flow chart is once we do the map and the design round, we have this all done once. We have it all kind of held together rather than having to go back through and reread the stack of patents and file histories as we go through things. So when we're doing design rounds or white space analysis, we try to keep all this relatively well mapped out for ourselves, so that if I get hit by a bus, then the person who steps in my shoes the next day to continue to work for the client will actually see and be able to see kind of ontologically what we came up with in these things. So that's more or less what that's about. So as I said, the output's in a spreadsheet. Pretty much we find it very easy to use. One of the reasons we use it this way because we can then put macros into play, which help us judge relevance of any particular concept in the claim, so we can knock things out. In an infringement analysis or an FTO, we can quickly figure out what we don't care about.
So meaning if you've abstracted a particular concept and you've already got that mapped to multiple patents and multiple claims within those patents in the portfolio of patents that you're looking at, if you can knock out that one abstraction, that might knock out a whole group of patents and their claims.
That's correct. Actually, you're hired as a straight man here, because that's exactly what I was going to show here. So this is hard probably to see everybody online here, but this is essentially a map that we produce here at the firm. Each vertical purple and white stripe here represents an individual patent application or grant. The subcategories here are individual claims. So on the left-hand side, we have essentially fragments of the claim or generic, kind of pseudo synonyms for sculpting. So when we work with other engineers of our clients, we go through and we actually ask them, do you do this or do you not do this? And we assign it a 1 to 3 ranking. So a 3 would be, they need it, they have to keep it in there. That we'd have to do further review on. But if they say 1 or 2, in general, those are not of interest. And we can clearly, very quickly, using the pseudo-synonym approach, knock out a great deal of matters under review and move them away from the actual review themselves. And then one thing we will probably be doing in our advanced series is really looking into the different ways that this type of a mapping can be used, both within an FTO and a non-infringement analysis. and both as a potential infringement analysis as well when you're looking at this type of disclosure. Now, correspondingly, we use the same type of metaphor for doing white space analysis, but in this case, what we've done here is this should be a little easier to read. Is we've got a series of ontologies that we have as what we call tech categories, with a genus, species, and subspecies. So at least 3 tiers of detail about where the prior density is, and then we color code them by either in the specification where there's high density disclosure, low density disclosure, or actually no disclosure. So this is when we're coming up with mobile devices for headgear and white space analysis, we can knock out things that are very quickly said. Things that are mounted on a baseball cap would be cap genus, sports headwear, subspecies or species, and then down in the subspecies would be where on the hat might this mobile device be located. So on the bill, on the clasp in the back of the head, or under the top. So one of the things that we do in this type of prior density discussion is really try to enforce a genealogy or a genus, not a genealogy, a genus of review, so that we're not boiling the ocean again. We're asking a specific question: does this disclose headwear and mobile devices in the same specification, and how specific and detailed do we get on that? So when we work with clients, we can very quickly show them where the low or no disclosure zones are, while still keeping them informed. As here's the area you probably you're not going to find any invention in, or you're not going to find any value because there's a high disclosure in this area as well. So again, 2 different views. This is the claim view, and this would be a white space or specification density review as well.
Worth noting, in the white space prior art density map view, as opposed to the claim map view where you're looking at things patent by patent and even down to the detail of claim by claim, you've got the columns grouped by assignee, so by the company that owns the patents, because you're looking at this thing as a white space. Where am I going to be able to fit what I'm trying to develop? And doing that, one, makes the visual a lot simpler because you're able to group the patents. And on top of that, from a business perspective, knowing where there is density and who owns that density is also particularly helpful. Whether this is a partner, a potential partner, or a competitor, or a really hated competitor potentially, that you're going to have to deal with respect to certain of the technologies. Very useful on the business side of things.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more this more. There are a few examples here at the end here we can talk to how we do this and how we use this. Let's just keep clipping along here because we're at 15 minutes to the hour. So let's just talk about the pitfalls about white space now. So what is disclosed is the key aspect of white space. Your search result. If you don't have the search result iterated, or if you have had some third party generate your search result, I would go back and at least spend some time in iterative review of that. Gray, white, and green papers are. We had an interesting discussion of what a gray paper, white paper, and green paper is earlier today, and they're frankly all related and interrelated. So that's just non-patent literature that is not readily available, is sometimes your best source of destroying your white space, because somebody, even though they haven't patented it, someone wrote about it. A lot of your where you have competitor things, if you have a high degree of disclosure in an area and no degree of disclosure by a certain company, you may want to go back there and do some inquiry as to whether they might be considering some of that stuff a trade secret or not. Again, the glossary. The glossary is what either floats or sinks your boat here. If you're not precise with your creation of synonyms and pseudo-synonyms, you can open yourself into a risk that you have been too optimistic about what words mean and don't mean. So this is why you need both your legal and your technology people there, because a lot of times what people call things in a technological sense is not what they've been defined in the patents for legal sense. They both have to be there. An overly narrow, overly narrow or overly broad interpretation of these things can kill you. You really need to be precise about figuring out where multiple definitions exist, or if they've been actually purposely misconstruing their definitions in the patent. I'm sure no one's ever found a patent definition that could read on a spaceship and a high-heeled shoe in the same specification, but it happens, and sometimes that's a purposeful thing. Also, I've never seen patents being accused of being unambiguous. I find a lot of ambiguous definitions in patent specifications. So again, these are all pitfalls, and this is why you can't do it with statistics. You have to spend some time as a human subject matter expert, maybe more than one human subject matter expert, working through the white space analysis, because it is just straightforward difficult. Any other thoughts, Tom, before we kind of go with examples?
Let's jump to the examples.
All right. So we're coming down here. So let's talk about kind of the product world. So in a new product launch, often, especially when a company's starting a new product, kind of a new area. So if you're doing essentially a change in what you're going to sell, a change in how you sell, or a change in the technology what you're selling, oftentimes we'll have clients that ask us to do freedom to operate studies. And so in conjunction with those freedom to operate studies, we try to do a new IP ideation. So what does that mean? We said, given what you know about your product and what you want to launch, what is that product going to look like in 5 years' time without a limitation on headcount and cost? So what optimally should this look like? So what we try to do is help them understand, the product not just at launch in 6 months to a year in development, but we try to understand what the product commercially is going to be 5 years out. So in the freedom to operate side, we will do searches on both the near term and the midterm, which is 5 years in my mind, viewpoints, and try to figure out if anybody's projected that space. That helps us also understand where the white space starts to occur if people are thinking forward 5 years, because in many cases the patent applications don't make that large of a leap. So we try to do both a freedom to operate analysis, and then if we are fortunate enough to have a client who cares about that, we will then step into the white space where we take that 5-year ideation and start to look out for what extent of disclosure exists in this area, and what are your competitors especially disclosed in this area, so maybe there's some places you can do some interdiction in that respect.
And thinking about when you're looking out that 5 years, it's thinking about not just, like you said, what does my product look like today, but since a patent is a negative right, thinking about, well, all right, if I was going to take a look at my competitor's architecture and apply that to some of the new ideas that I'm thinking about, what would their products look like in 5 years that are going to be competing with this product of mine? Because that might present some valuable opportunities to fill in some white space as well.
Absolutely, and so we tend to do that, more expansively in new products. But we also have kind of existing product expansions as well, because we oftentimes we'll have a client who is going 5 minutes upstream or 5 minutes downstream from their core product, and they're trying to discover whether or not their existing open applications and so forth have more area that we can mine out of their specification to assist them get bigger and broader claims. And also, we also can then look at the other competitor claims that have been put into play since that time, and see if there's an ability to thread new disclosures through that needle, and maybe even file new applications that would go beyond what the current application has covered. That tends to get more and more rare the more mature a patent family is, but nonetheless, we can then do more or less a white space analysis by saying we want to have our product do this 5 minutes before someone would normally use our product, or would do this other product post initial use there. So the white space then becomes another set of 20 questions as to, well, what are you going to do? And then we can start to backfill that story into the white space analysis. So, I mean, those are two kind of examples on the product launch side. Let's quickly jump to. You have something else, Tom?
Let's go to M&A.
Okay, let's go to M&A. So M&A is really, I think, one of the most overlooked uses of this analysis because, you know, a lot of times we stop at synergy analysis. But one of the things that we almost always have is, you know, when you're doing buying a company, there's going to be an existing board paper where, you know, the people buying the company try to put in writing what they're going to do with it and try to show that they're convinced that the investment this is going to have an ROI and ROP. So, and many times you're going to have a forward-looking story in respect to that. So you take that forward-looking story, and then you use that to start your 20 questions in a white space analysis, and then you start to say, well, okay, what you're buying, what possibly is covered in that claim. So we start to look at the claim overlap between the targets that you're buying, or the target that you're buying, the portfolio you're buying, and see, is there any value there? Because many times you're going to find that the portfolio of the company you're buying has suffered somehow from lack of understanding of what was valuable in their product or something like that. So what you're looking for is there any hidden disclosure or less than optimized disclosure in there to do this? And so that's another way you might take the white space and start looking at in that respect. The alternative is that if you're looking at a multi-year acquisition strategy, say you want to enter a new business area, say e-discovery or something along that line, you start to look at no one company is going to fulfill your goals to get into that marketplace. So you're looking at a kind of a blended strategy to bring things together. So what you can do there is start to overlap what they have in IP ahead of time, and start to understand. Will the new product development team that is going to be blending all these different targets technologies together, are they going to have the opportunity for an IP protection to that ultimate product? Given what you've got here, do you have to start and just kind of ideate from the start and do something without reservation in kind of a forward-looking status? Also, you can also use this for enforcement and licensing. So maybe you have part of the portfolio that you just don't care about, but there might be valuation or disposal value to the remainder of the portfolio for something that you don't care about. So you could trade that with somebody else for something you do or don't care about. And then finally, in standards contribution is if you've got a company that belongs to a certain standard and you're buying a company that also belongs to a standard, you may want to start to go back and understand what essentially you've contributed, so that and do a kind of a white space on the essential patent contribution as well. So I mean, there's a rich environment for white space analysis and kind of forward-looking analysis in this particular space in the M&A world. So, Tom, sorry, I've been kind of dominating here.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and even the simple landscape. If it's a technology, say you're purchasing a company because of particular technologies that they have or technologies that fit within your company's strategy, use those technologies to drive a landscape analysis, overlay your current portfolio on top of that to see kind of your standing within the landscape, overlay then with that or add in the M&A target along with it, you get an idea for what the company's fit post M&A will look like within that landscape, and if that is sufficient enough, or if there's additional development that needs to be done, and then if there is, can some of that, like Mark, like you mentioned, be kind of pulled out of the portfolio that's being acquired, or are there other players that gets to the multiple target that that are worth bringing in to that whole strategy as long as we're spending money. You know, if we need to lock down a portion of the market from an IP perspective, then it might highlight particular other players that have key technologies to help kind of corner that piece of the landscape that you're going after.
Absolutely. So in the interviewing time, we got 4 minutes left here. So if you have any follow-up, any questions, please start typing them now. But it would just kind of highlight the key takeaways. This is really, really difficult. There are so many places you can get this wrong that I think white space analysis is an area that has a lot of growth potential in it as we develop better tools. It currently requires a lot of human analysis. It currently requires a lot of human validation of data. The commercial providers do not do a good job in this area. I mean, if you take one thing away, again, white space means a very specific thing, and if someone tells you otherwise, they're probably selling you a landscape. So to that end, that's it. That's the end of the series here. I do appreciate everyone coming along with us here. If you have any more questions, we'd like to hear more of your thoughts. And Tom, any follow-up thoughts as well?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank everybody as well, and remind that we'll be emailing out a test link for this certification following the webinar. Keep an eye on your inbox, and of course, if you don't receive anything, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll make sure that you get that link. And look for upcoming webinars that we're going to be doing, as Mark mentioned, on some of the more deep dives into how to do some of these more complicated analytics. So we look forward to being back with any and all of you in the future. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. And I haven't seen any questions come up yet here, so we'll give it a minute or two left. But again, also feel free to reach out to Tom and I. We're both on LinkedIn. All of the webinars are available on demand, so that if you did miss some of the webinars, you can go back to, I believe, Black Hills IP is where they reside, and we will definitely follow up in the mailing to everyone with kind of where you can find these things on demand. At the end of the thing there, you can also, the link to the certification will be there. Also, please feel free to reach out and say, I'm curious about X, Y, or Z, just privately if you'd like, and we can try to take those questions and try to give you some good educational comments on those as we go. But thank you very much. I don't see any more questions, so thanks for coming. Thanks for playing. So we'll talk to you all later.
Thanks. Bye now.